All right, here we go. Another Terrain Tuesday. Buddy, welcome, welcome. Yeah, everything coming through okay? Well, it seems like we're off for a slow start this Tuesday. Hello, hello, hello. Oh, hi there. Everybody hear me okay? Just kind of waiting a few minutes. Give everybody a chance to get in that wants to show up tonight. If anybody has any questions or comments to answer reading. Nice sweltery Tuesday in El Dorado, Kansas. Love humidity. I was just commenting on the beautiful humidity in El Dorado, Kansas. trying to keep hydrated. So what is everybody working on tonight? Carving a leather wedding belt. That could go any way. Any versions of that. What makes that wedding night adventurous? Hey, who brought the leather wedding belt? I got it, honey. I spent most of the day getting stuff ready for the virtual convention this weekend, started on Friday. I'm both looking forward to it and terrified. We don't talk about that stuff in Kansas. One-way ticket. It will be interesting for sure. It has been quite a while since I've played, and but it'll be fun. We'll get some gaming in, we'll get some talking in, we'll get some painting in. So just gonna have a bro weekend, and everybody gets to watch. More in. Chat here. Wait here another minute and we'll get to going. Everybody that comes in late can just catch up. Got 2 hours. Well, let's get started. We're here to make some terrain tonight, so that's what we're going to work on. What we're doing tonight is kind of concentrating on some tree terrain, and some rough areas, depending on what game you play or how it qualifies that. Well, thank you, Harley Ryder. I do it two different ways. The way that I'm going to show tonight is the normal way that I do it. I've done some pieces like this that the trees are already mounted to the big bases, because I had to do a bunch for tournaments, and it was just easier to set it up that way. So I'm going to show you how I normally do it. It's a little more versatile that way, and you can get a little more use out of it. But the first thing that we start with is MDF. I use 3mm. Sometimes this can be hard to find. Sometimes it's not. We have a local Sutherland's here, which is kind of like our little Home Depot. And one day they'll have it, and the next day that they won't. This is not masonite, and this is not hardboard. A lot of people will tell you that they're all the same, but they are not. This is MDF. This is medium density board. That's kind of a compacted cardboard product with smooth sides on both of it. Like I said, you can get it thicker. I think they make it a little bit thinner in some places, but I like the 3mm or 1/8 inch. And you can get a big sheet of it, 4x4 sheet of it. You can get piles and piles out of terrain. I think I bought an 8-foot sheet, I don't know, 10 years ago, and I'm still cutting pieces. So what I normally do, and I try to work in kind of this size of a piece, kind of a 6-inch size, because that just works good on the board, I think, and especially for CAV. And that way it allows you to put a lot of different things on there, but have a bunch on there. A few of them take a lot of space. So generally what I do is I cut a strip 6 inches wide off the end of it, and then cut them again in 6 inches or 3 inches, or you're wanting to make different shapes. You're not looking at just making circles or squares or whatever, because it just gets kind of boring. Any kind of saw, I use a table saw, and not everybody's got all those kind of tools. There's something out there, I'm sure, that everybody will have that cut these. After I get them cut into basic squares or whatever, then I'll go in and cut some angles, cut some corners off, get strange shapes here. I use a bandsaw. I've got a little tiny unit that I bought years ago at, I don't know, Northern Tool or Harbor Freight or something. A little Chinese something, kind of a saw, but it works really good for cutting this stuff. And MDF's not bad about tearing your blades up. They last quite a bit. So that's what I do, is like I said, after I cut a strip with the table saw, I'll go in and with the bandsaw, cut me off some squares, and then just start cutting out corners and V's or whatever to kind of get a basic shape. The next thing that I do is I sand it. Again, I've got a little table sander that I picked up at Harbor Freight or whatever, and I just kind of go in and start rounding off the pieces, put some curves in there, whatever I want to do to get a little more game shape. And the next thing that I do, and I painted this top of this gray so you can see what I've done. is I take the sander on the belt and I grind the sides down. And you can be as neat as you want to, or again, I try to be a little bit of trying to not keep everything symmetrical because I think it gives a better look. So that gets me down to my basic pieces, and I'm ready to go from there. Anybody have any questions? Any of that? All right. So next thing, like I said, this stuff's pretty simple so far. Is after I have it sanded down, now I paint it. This is just, if you caught our terrain show last week, this is basically the same process. I give it a good brown coat, like so. I use a roller, little hand roller, and roll it out right quick. Front of the TVs for, I'm used to room. Again, this is just exterior latex flat paint that I get to Sherwin. Like I said last week, you get what you pay for. Really, if you're going to do a bunch of this and you want it to last and work out better for you, make sure that you don't go cheap with the paint. You don't have to buy highest quality out there, but I haven't had very good luck with the Walmart brands. I think Walmart sells Glidden too, and I think I've had okay luck with. I really like Bear and Sherwin-Williams. So, and I get these little tiny rollers just because they're great, they're cheap. If clean them, great. If I don't get them clean, then throw them away. It's grab you another one. So, but I'll roll it on here right quick. And normally I use more of a paint stamp. Maybe we could stretch out. Normally when this is all loaded up, you can put it out pretty quick. Just trying not to make a huge mess in my limited space. And and if you're doing a lot of this, and I have before, you can set these all out on a sheet of plastic and take a Wagner or something like that and just spray the lot of them all at one time. All right. So that gets our basic shape down here. Gets our first coat on there. So we want to let that dry. Now it's kind of a decision process as to how you want to finish this out. You can either leave it plain and we'll grass it. Or if you want to be a little more adventurous, you can add some rock, some gravel to it. This would be a good time to do that while it's before you start putting grass down. And especially if you're trying to build some rough or something like that, you can go in, and this would be the best time to if you're just wanting to add a little bit to something like this. Generally, what I do, if I'm just gonna, for trees and stuff, I try not to get too big with rocks. But the rock generally, and I kind of skipped a step, because generally I put the rock on before I put the brown. If I'm just doing a plain one, I go ahead and do the brown. If I plan on putting rock or something, that needs to go on before I put the brown paint on. And that the reason why is it gives it a good undercoat and it helps seal it up. So we're going to go ahead and we'll just use this one again and put some rock on it. Now, the best thing to use for rocks and boulders is rocks. You can't go wrong with rocks. Well, that wouldn't be the first time. But you can see here, these ones that I've made up. I've got a big gravel drive. I just go out, pile me up, give me a cup full, bring them in, wash them. They're ready to go. So I have them. But another thing you can do, especially if you have a lot of leftover from making terrain, get all these little bits and pieces like this from cutting stuff off. These are great to come in and kind of carve them up a little bit too. Get a big knife going here. But you can come back in here and just kind of hack you off some shapes. Remember, you're simulating, you know, the rocks sticking up out of the ground, so there's no wrong here. Just kind of start cutting. Just say it's very sharp, so don't cut your finger off. Hollering and screaming at me. You will cut yourself. It always happens. Just be ready for it. Have some first aid stuff around. But you can just go in here and just carve it. And make whatever shape you want. I try to cut them down so they're not tall, that they're not really elevation levels, but just okay. So, and like I said, the little pieces that are left over from doing your terrain, like we did last week, are great for that. You get all kinds of little slivers of pieces left over. Okay, so now you can go in and, like I said, if you grab some rocks from out in the driveway or place parking lot or something like that, then those are great to use for boulders. Catch you some chopping a little more. These here. Up a little bit. This is a good place too. The white, the little bead foam is good for making this kind of stuff, other than it's just a mix. At least with the foam, it stays together a little. This is where I like to use. This is Elmer's Pro Bond Advanced. It's another PVA glue, but it dries a lot faster. So I think I like using it. But spread it out good. I don't use it for building big sheets of terrain because if it doesn't get air to it, it won't dry. So on the smaller. Come in here and if you got some rocks, gravel, got a little glue here. Think what it looks like in when you see it out in nature. Go some up here. There is no wrong way. Now I do have my little trusty oil dry gravel. Yeah. Soak in. That's why I love this oil dry. It really soaks up paint or glue or you can leave it there for a little bit and then I give it a little bit of shake and I try not to shake all of it off depending on how crazy I want to get with the rock, because what I'm going to end up doing is after I have this where I want it, spread it around a little, all piled up. This is where I go ahead and spray it with some watered down PVA. I believe that normally I mix this 10 parts water to 1 part PVA glue, and I just use Elmer's, because you can buy those big gallon things at Walmart. Hello, James. How are you doing? But this is where, and just grab a spray bottle. This was something left over from Clee. But this is where you want to spray this down on your rock. And this one of the, like that. And that's one of the reasons why I do it both ways. MDF will soak up water, and you know, if you're doing a lot of stuff on it, as it dries, you have to worry a little bit about it warping. But you know, I did all these things earlier today, and everything's straight. You know, it can go either way. But and then when this dries, of course, this will help seal all that rock to your piece, and it dries matte. You won't even see it on there. So that's a good way to go ahead and do your. You want to have some rock. You want to add some elements to your piece. Then just set it aside and let it dry. Dry is usually pretty cool. Did all these probably noon today. They, you know, by 2 or 3, they were ready to go. All right. It is messy. Look at that. Okay, so let's say first off that we're not going to do any rock. Come back to the rock in a minute. So this is pretty straightforward. What I like to do is I like to have these pieces here, and then I like to grass them like I do my terrain. So I put a little brown on there. I put a little spread it around and give it a chance to dry. And the reason I do this way is this gives me a border for my terrain element. So this is a hex or a rough area, whatever you want to classify it as. But for the benefits of trees, what I do is I like to put the trees on their own bases like this. That way I can come in during the game and set up the trees wherever I want them. And that way, if when a model's trying to move through there, if I need to, I can move the tree out of the way. So that is the way I normally like to set up my. I like it to be able to move around. And that's a good way if you're playing a game that you have light or medium or heavy or whatever woods. You know, you can define that and say if it's got 2 woods and less, it's light. If it's 3 woods or more, it's heavy. You know, it's however you want to state it. And even, you know, you don't have to go that small. You can have pieces like this sit on there as well. So it's really just preference, but that I like to keep my trees on small bases, which we'll go into that here in a little bit. So so let's say we're just gonna do our base piece. So we've got it, it's painted, cut, it's sanded, it's painted, ready to go. So we do the same thing that we did earlier. With green. Just a little there. So all right, got her that. Okay, so we get another roller here. So get our piece up here. We're going to get our paint rollers about on it. Roll. So again, I roll it out. I get all my that's what roll it out. Okay, so after I got my paint on there, All right, and this is pretty straightforward, just like we did the other night with the terrain. I start off with a little brown. Sit on. Kind of pick you a couple of areas. Just trying to break it up a little bit. Okay. We have our big tub of green here, so we'll once we got that on there, let it soak there for a minute. It'll soak in for a little bit, do its thing for a minute. Now, normally I let these sit and dry up, not handle them too much, because you will find that when you grass on anything that's wet, you touch it with anything, the grass comes off. So you want to be super careful with them, not touch all that trouble to. Okay, so that gets us our base colors there. And because this type of stuff gets handled so much more during a game, again, I go ahead and after it's dried, I let the paint dry normally, but come and give it a good spritzing here. Like I said, you see the glue right now, but once it dries, you'll never. But you can see right here, I don't know if it shows up good or not. That's one of the reasons I like the undercoat is brown, is because of I sprayed it so close. Spray actually. That's the reason why I like to have it dry before I. We can put a little grass, a little green on it here. Great thing about terrain is all random. Can't mess up. We'll let that go. Like I said, normally after you do the paint and you put the grass on it, let it dry overnight. You can come back and spray it with the glue. Now, so after it's all dried, this is what we end up with. Now, this is a good time that you can come in, and if you have little elements that you've picked up here or there, you want to add to it, this is a good time to do those. You want to have some shrubbery on here. Crusty little glue here, and you don't want to have too much on there so that it gets in the way of putting trees. put this on here, and again, you're just trying to break it up a bit. You can use little tufts. You can use collared. This comes in all. I tend to just kind of stay with what I've got because it's taking so much of it. Set that off to the side and let it dry. But that right there is my basic tree element. So it's no muss, no fuss. They're pretty easy to make. You can, like I said, come back later, add your trees during the game time so you can move them around. But that's trees. So we'll talk about basing them and stuff here in a second. But anybody got any questions as to what we've done there so far? And you'll probably find little ways that you like to do it a little different. You like to tweak this a little bit, you know, whatever works for you. Static grass worth the effort. Static grass is an art. Easy art to learn. You get the right stuff to do it. It's big in England. UK gamers, everything that they do over there have static grass. It is its own look. And for those that don't know what static grass is instead of this being ground up, grass actually comes in little fibers. They can be 1/8 of an inch, 1/4 of an inch, or whatever. And you use a electric charge in order to generate static, and it makes the grass stand up straight. So you can come in and put your glue in and put your grass in, and as you spread that grass out, it's got an electrode that there's 10,000 different YouTube videos out there on how to do static grass, but it is its own look. It's think that it doesn't hold up as well as this because this is all soaked into the paint and everything. I think you have to be a lot more careful transporting it so that you don't tear it up or get it knocked down and everything like that. So again, it's just a choice, but it looks pretty cool. A lot of people combine the two, just like we did here with the bushes and stuff like that. You can come in and you know, if you wanted some taller grass or weeds or making fields or something like that, you can put that static grass on there. That's how they make tufts, by the way, unless it's the little foliage stuff. But when you see the little clumps with the so I don't know if you can see this piece right here very well, but this is a tuft of static grass, and that's how they make this. They take a dollop of this type of glue. They just on a piece of wax paper or some kind of a rubber glue or what different glues that they use, and they put the charge on there and sprinkle it on there, and that grass just stands up and stays in that. So that's how you ever use those little tufts. Anything else? And it's a mess, like everything else. Kind of goes with the territory. All right, so let's talk about basing trees. Now, what I like to do is I like to use washers. The bigger the tree, the bigger the washer. Now, making trees. Let's stop for a minute before we go to base. Let's talk about trees. You can make your own trees. Yeah, if it's not messy, it's not. That is true. But that is in of itself an art form, and they're hard. Trees are hard to make. And anymore, they get these in from China or Vietnam or wherever all this stuff is made. And you can't make them really unless you're just making the 100,000 trees. It's hard to make them as cheap and as good as you can already buy them. Yes, washers for the. So for a tree, and scale is going to have a lot to do with the trees that you do. Bigger trees are easier to make, so it may be that if you're 28 millimeter or something. For 10 millimeter, I try not to go over like 3 inches, 3.5 inches. Because basically in 10 millimeter scale, about 3/4 of an inch is 10 feet. Line of sight can be tricky. And this is why, because obviously, go out and you look across the field, you can see to the other side of the county generally, especially in Kansas. But what makes a war game fun is the maneuver. So if they're not, there's no reason if you can both get to a certain range and there's nothing in between you for you to do anything else but stand there, shoot. And that's the way it would be in the real world. If you had an American and a Russian tank battalion fighting in Kansas, and they got to range with one another, or when the Marines were over in Kuwait shooting across the desert, that's all they did. They moved, to make it harder for other tanks to hit them, but it was kind of circling the wagons and just killing everything in there. And depending on the rules that you're playing, that can move things around a little bit if they're trying to move a little bit to make them harder to hit. But other than that, they're pretty much going to stay at range and they're going to do each other. So that's the reason why in gaming, I'm always a big believer in the more stuff that you can put out there to break up line of sight in order to make people move, the better that it is. So trees are really good for that. In CAV, we have light and heavy woods. Light woods is light cover, heavy woods are heavy cover. And but multiple woods can also block line of sight, besides just affecting the actual to hit number. So in this case, we're going to say our little paint bottles here are models. But I've got 2 calves facing off here. Okay. So in calf, and we're going to say this is a heavy and this is a light. We'll go bigger for heavy and smaller. Right, and that's the way squad leaders were big about that, with all the fences and the hedgerows and there wasn't a lot of wide open battles in World War II. Most of the stuff was fought in and around towns, important areas. Of course, you have France when they were fighting there with all the hedgerows and the way that's all set up. There was very little time that they were wide open battles. You saw most of that in Africa, but in the European theater and everything like that. So, when you play squad leader or games like that, they really take that into account. The city fights, the maneuver fights, especially, you know, for Americans, especially earlier on in the war, for a Sherman to take out a Tiger tank or something like that, they couldn't take them on head on. So generally Shermans like to work in groups, and you know, they'd have one or two kind of showing their up their skirt a little bit to get the Tigers busy, while the other Shermans would maneuver to get behind them, and shoot through them through there. So they were big on looking for places of line of sight, using the hedgerows, using the tree lines, using forests and stuff like that, that they could get that Tigers couldn't get, so that they could get a better shot on them. So, but here in Cav, we don't have an elevation level for trees. So whether the trees are, however you want to put whatever models on here, but as far as line of sight's considered, you know, a forest area this tall and a forest area this tall is considered all the same. Always, if line of sight goes through that element, right? So, and this is where woods are great, especially if you're trying to if you really want to have maneuver and everything like that. Lots of woods are great, because in this case here, a heavy and a light blocks line of sight. So right now, these two calves can't see each other, okay? Now, if you take either one of them away, so we take the light woods away, now we just have a heavy, which counts basically as two lights. So they can see each other, but either of them shooting at the other one have a plus, the defender will get a +2, the attacker gets a -2 to their combat roll to make it harder for him to hit. If we took the heavy away and had the light woods, then we would just have the one. Now, a big question that comes up too a lot, we're talking Cav, trees. People ask about being in woods, okay? Everything in Cav works on a 1-inch zone. So if you're within 1 inch of cover or something like that, then you get the benefit of that, your elevations and everything. But right now, these two calves have a heavy woods between them. So both of them will get a -2 in order for their shot. Now, let's say that our calf moves into the heavy woods, okay? Until he gets within 1 inch of that edge, they are still -2 to hit. The minute that he gets his base within 1 inch of that edge, this model gets the -2, this model does not. Okay? As long as the edge of his base is within 1 inch of the edge of this element, and there's still some space there. Now, if he comes over here and gets right on the edge, there's no woods between them anymore, even though he's in the woods. Neither of them will get the benefit. All right, so you want to make sure that you're trying to get cover, you keep your base within 1 inch of that edge without actually crossing it. So that's how trees work in this particular instance. Now, we go back here and let's have some light woods. So we have, say we have 3 light woods. All right, in calf, and this is important too when you're setting up a board. Now, you can change this around a little bit based upon how you're trying to set it up. But basically, everything works on a 6-inch circle or whatnot. So any that I normally build. But as far as the rule's concerned, an element counts towards line of sight based on its size, its shape, not on its overall size. So if you make this great big 1-foot circle of trees, one piece, and you have it between the two calves, it only counts as one cover, one light cover, even though it's 12. Now, you can go in if if you want to say, okay, every 6 inches is a light woods or whatever, you can do that. But as far as the base rules of the game, whatever the size of that train element is, it counts as just one piece within that border. Now here though, because we would have 3 trees, these are 3 different elements, so each one counts as a light woods. 3 light woods blocks line of sight. You take one away, now they can see each other, but this is effectively heavy cover. So now they can see each other and both of them get the -2. You take another one away, now it's just light cover and it's a -1. So, and it doesn't matter whether they're up here, if they're up on a level 3 hill or whatever, line of sight goes through those elements. They still count towards line of sight. So trees are great for setting up a board. If you're really wanting to control the flow, obviously moving through trees is harder. So, they try to avoid them. They try to move around them unless they just have to go through them. So, trees are great for setting up a board, and you don't have to worry about elevation levels like you have to do with levels. If you're trying to build a level 3 hill, you got to have 3 pieces to get it up there. Or one big thick piece. Whereas here, you can have 20 terrain pieces, 20 tree pieces, set those down in the middle, effectively block line of sight and make it so that somebody's either got to come through or come around. So, does that all make sense? Anybody have any questions? You'll probably see lots of woods this weekend. And woods are just an easy way to break that up. So, all right, so let's get back to our trees. So we were talking about trees. I don't make trees. I used to make trees, especially when I played smaller scale games, 6mm, stuff like that. Trees were a lot easier to make out of pipe cleaner and stuff like that. The bigger scales, it's not nearly as fun. But if you look around, you can find these things on sale on Amazon, and there's 10,000 different trees and indirect fire. Basically, trees don't count towards indirect fire. So back here in our original example, on the camera here talking about. Okay, so obviously minimum range for indirect rockets are 12 inches. We're not going to go into the numbers. It's totally up to you, Sam. I leave that kind of vague so that you can set the board up how you think you should set it up. You can read the description and come up with your own idea, and you can go, well, I don't want that many trees. We want to be, we don't want to maneuver as much, or hey, we want to have to move through all these paths or something like that. Or, I need to use these trees to block line of sight so that they can't just come out and shoot buildings and stuff like that. So it's really up to you. I try not to make, when I generate a map, I try not to put, I put the basic elements on there and let you fill in terrain and hills and stuff like that so that you can make it really the board that you want. So anyway, regardless of range, right now, if either one of these wanted to indirect at each other, there would be no modifiers. Trees do not count any regardless, okay? Now, back to our 1 inch rule. If his base is within 1 inch of that light woods, that gives him light cover. It does not affect the strike point roll, because the strike point roll, you're shooting at the ground, not at him. So it wouldn't have anything to do with that. But let's say that you're on target and it's time to roll your combat roll. Instead of a 6, you're rolling against a 7 now because of the light wood. Okay? Now, if he's not in there, and let's say our guy is in here, okay? He gets the benefit of the light cover because his base is inside that area, okay? But it goes by the target, not by the attacker. So if he's in the woods, there is no light cover shooting out of the woods to this guy. Because our assumption would be if you were in the woods that you would move a little to the left or move a little to the right so that you could shoot your rockets and not hit a tree. I think that's right. But it goes based on the defender, where the defender is. So he could shoot here and there would be light cover. He could shoot at him and he would get the light cover benefit if they're on target. That makes sense, James? I need to add anything else? And there could be 50 trees between. Indirect ignores everything unless except where you're actually standing at or up against. So, and that's another place where cover can come in too. So let's say this is a level 3 or bigger building. Because he's up with his base is with 1 inch, it count as blocking cover. So they do not have line of sight, and you cannot indirect if you are within 1 inch of blocking cover. You have to move back. That's kind of how we made some changes with the errata. Yes, that would be, you're just going to have to kind of home rule that, you know, if you're up underneath a bridge or an overhang or something like that. Obviously, indirect fire would not be able to hit you, but you would not also be able to shoot out. There's no rockets like this and then going up or whatever. It's all coming straight down from above. So sometimes you have to use a little game discretion when you're playing. But as far as the way that in the errata, the way that it's set up now, is if you get up against blocking cover, you cannot shoot and you cannot be shot. And that's the same thing for aircraft. Even though aircraft normally have line of sight to everybody, if you're up against a level 3 blocking cover, the aircraft can't shoot you, you can't shoot the aircraft. If you are within 1 inch or in a light woods, you and the aircraft can shoot each other, but both of you are shooting through the light woods for cover. So remember that. If you're right up against it. That helps a little bit with the light guys, giving them a place, a hide place. Okay, so I'm gonna finish up with trees and bases right quick. So again, you can buy these on Amazon. You can buy them Train, hobby stores, or whatever. I think that the last batch that I bought through Plastruck, which is a big styrene plastic modeling place. They periodically have sales, and that's what these type of trees are. They have these and the ever. I just like them. They're cool looking trees. I don't like all that lichen trees. So I think these were, I don't know, 50 cents, 75 cents a piece, and I got a 2-foot square box out there for them and everything. So back to washers. If you're lucky, and like I said, I try to use 1 inch, 1 inch and a quarter washers for the bigger trees, 3/4, 1 inch for the smaller trees. The taller the tree, the bigger the washer, obviously, to keep it from. If you're lucky and you buy trees that are pre-based, so it saves you one of the steps that I'm having to show you. So if you have your washer, you can just glue that tree right on there, like so. Now, if you want to, you can go in there and, put a little spackling, a little wood filler, a little green stuff, if you want to mold that in there. But it saves you a lot of time and trouble if you buy it with bases. Most trees, especially if they're architectural trees, do not come with bases. They just have a wire sticking out of the bottom of them, because a lot of the architect stuff is on styrofoam and foam core and stuff, so they can just stick them in there without, like so. It just has a little bit of a wire. Do that in order to poke it into something. So if your trees do not have a base, then you have to be a little trickier. So what I tend to do is I primer these with a little gray etching primer. That way it kind of roughs up the surface a little bit so that primer sticks better to bare metal. Then I'll go back and put black, primer them in black. So just so that they, just my preference. You don't have to, you can leave them metal if you I went ahead and did this one without doing the black, just so I could show you. So since I don't have a base on my trees, I need to put something on there to act as a base. So what I do here is I cut up a little piece of popsicle stick back from the edge just a little bit, super glue that on there, and that A, covers up the hole, and B, it gives me a nice piece of wood later to drill a little hole through for those trees. So then what I do from there is I will take wood filler. You can use green stuff. I like wood filler because you can get this. Again, this is something I've had for a couple of years, and it's easy to, once it dries hard, you sand it, you carve it, you can paint it, you can do whatever you want to do with it. So I will take that and now I guess I went ahead and painted. Anyway, so here's a piece that I've taken here with the wood filler, put around my piece of popsicle stick, like so. And that gives me a good solid base to use for my trees. I go ahead and use a drill, put a little hole in the center now. You don't have to if you want to do it after you put the grass on. We do these just like we do the tree things. Or I paint them brown, I let them dry. I paint them green, I grass them dry. Spray them with a little glue. Either already have the hole drilled or not have the hole drilled. And then put a little dollop of hot glue on there, drop a tree in there, and voila. You got a nice heavy base for him to sit there on there like that. And you don't have to do these all in stretch my legs here. Stools. You don't have to do them in green. You can do them in any color that you want. You can use brown, and also I meant to say on trees. Another thing that you can do with trees is you can go to like Michael's or Hobby Lobby or Walmart, anything that has plastic plants, flowers, things like that. You'd be amazed what you can do with plastic plants to make up trees, to make up, especially if you want an alien look, if you're trying to come up with something. So, so here are a couple that I'd made from stuff that I found at Walmart, and I did the light brown um, sides on them. Generally, they look a little nicer than this, but so kind of see there. But these are just like $2 plants, plastic plants from Walmart that I just chopped up. I think this one here had, I don't know, like 12 of these on there. And you can, I mean, that's, you know, this blue foam would be easy to cut up for that. If you have access to a 3D printer, there are piles of files on Thingiverse. And even if you had to pay for them, you can go pay $2 and get 50 different files to come up with stuff like that. So there's a lot of cool stuff that you can do. That's the great thing about sci-fi. With alien worlds, you can make anything. The other cool thing that you can do after this grass, after you grass these, you can paint these any color that you want. And come back and dry brush them later. So let's say we'll go ahead and let's put a little bit of down on. We'll let it dry while we're. So we put grass on it. It's all grassed up. But you can come back with your paint and actually paint this stuff. You don't want to use good brushes. But, you know, if you're playing on a Martian planet and you're, you know, or red, and your color schemes are reds or something, you want to have your bases match up with it. You can do it with the bases, the big bases too. I've done lots of boards that way where first I use my Wagner to paint them up, but I just use normal grass blocking to put on there, and then I just come back and just spray it whatever color that I want. Seal it up. You want to be a lot of paint on there, in there, and let that dry for a little bit. But like I said, you can whatever color that you want. You just look at it like you're painting a mini. You have your base color. You want to come back with your middle color and maybe do a wash on it, and then let that dry. And then at that point, that it dries hard. So you can come back and dry brush it. Come up with all kinds of different. You can do it with sand. If you want something a little harder and you're planning on doing that, you can sand and use it for your flock. So that's where you're at with basing the trees. Now, if you want to do, you know, if you want to just put the trees directly into the thing, camera again, it's the same thing. You just drill holes in there and run the wires in there, or you can glue the tree right to that if you want them like that. I try not to do that with my own stuff because I like to be able to move the trees around, put different ones on there for the look. Well, I have found, like I said, if you use good paint and you put the flocking on there while the paint is still wet, generally that paint will soak into it and will do enough to keep it from on there. Especially with the terrain piece, it just seems like it sticks to the foam, styrofoam a lot better. Because these get handled more, and it's a harder surface after it dries, after the paint and the flocking is dried, I go back and spray it with a 10-to-1 PVA glue mix, so 10 parts water to 1 part glue. You want just enough glue in there so that when you spray it, you see it kind of looks like skim milk. And it'll dry and seal that up, and it'll be matte colored, so you can do that too. And I just put it into whatever bottle I've got. This was some cleaning bottle, and I mix this stuff up by the gallon and use it up. But I found after it's set for a couple of days, it's hard to get the grass to come off with just the paint. If you use a good quality paint. If you use a cheap paint, the grass comes off, and then you really need to make sure you spray the glue on it. But if you use a good paint, I found that it can save you a step. It's not that big a deal to spray that on there, but especially if I'm putting gravel or something on there, I want to spray it with some glue. But I was talking a second ago about painting the grass. So you can see here, that's all I did here with this stuff. This is all painted grass. I think there's a little sand mixed into it too, but you can go in there and actually paint the colors and blend it in and come back and dry brush it. So it's really versatile with. Yeah, 10-to-1. That's why I mix mine, 10 parts water to 1 part glue. All right, so let's talk about our roughs a little. We worked on those earlier. And these, like I said, I sprayed these with glue after I put them together to seal the rock in there. I've got a couple of little leafy plants that I 3D printed here that I've added to it that I can go in later. But after I've got this all set and ready, just like I did here, is I go back and I just paint the whole thing brown. So this helps, again, seal it up, kind of ties it all together. It gives you a good base color. Then you can come in, and that's kind of what I was showing here, is here's the piece all painted brown. Then I came in with some gray paint and just kind of picked out the rocks. You're not trying to be super fancy. You're just kind of putting it on the top because you see browns and everything together, and you're good to go there. Next, then I take a black wash and put that on there pretty liberal where the rock's in. Again, that fills down into the cracks that you may have missed or whatever like that. Then you can come back in and dry brush some light gray on there and add your grass. I just put a little green paint on there and move my grass around and spray it down. You can use whatever colors that you want to put in there. But that, and you don't have to, if you want to stay, if you want to use browns, you can, and you can use whatever colors that you want to go with to tie that all together. But that way, when the piece lays down on the board, it all starts kind of matching up. So it gives you some boundaries. And yeah, I try to build my stuff practical. I don't try to make it super detailed, accurate, as far as not trying to build the immaculate. Here's some other stuff I built earlier today. Again, using little pieces of the foam, rocks, gravel, little 3D plant there. That all up. Another piece here. I can go over and fit in however I want to. So that's pretty much how I build my rough wood. The more the merrier. You can't, like I said, I'm a firm believer you can't have too much rain. Plus, even when you use the tan on here, by having the tan mixed in on your boards, you can put the tan on there. Where it all blends in. What kind of unique terrain? Not anything really different from anybody else. It's just dependent on the alien world that you want to try to build around, whether it's a lava planet or a jungle planet or desert or that's that gets into a whole nother level of putting stuff together, especially if you're doing a desert board. Something I'm working on right now is I'm trying to figure out a cool way to do dunes for a desert board that looks like they're dunes, but playable too. Made piles and piles. But the amethyl are basically A&Es. So you want to kind of use some elf ideas behind them. Yeah, because I mean, you want to have lots of different boards, and that's the good thing about. All right, hold on, stretch time. That's the good thing about the mats that are available now. I used to make all my baseboards, but with all the mats that you have out there now, there's desert, there's cities, there's jungle. I mean, there's just so much stuff out there that it's just, I don't even mess with making mats anymore, and just build my terrain to match up with the mat. So it's very easy to have a bunch of stuff that you can use right off the bat. Yeah, I mean, the amethyl are basically dark elves, for lack of. I mean, they're not really elves, but they're kind of based off of that type of a race. Well, it depends on the slope of the dune. If they're low, uh, and the type of sand and everything like that. The biggest challenge that is going to have with a big sandy dune battle area is you're not going to have a lot of high terrain. So obviously vehicles would be a lot better for cover if you're trying to move through the dunes. If I could figure out enough room to put all of them, I will, James. I've thrown a bunch of the older ones that I built the boards for away just because just I run out of space. But yeah, you can use the baking soda for to put down the grit or whatever on the deal. But you know, when you're cutting what I'm more worried about is how to cut the dune out of styrofoam to make it look like a dune, and that's where I'm studying. And there's lots of different kind of dunes. You can get sandblasting sand, comes in lots of different grits, and you can get it pretty fine where it would think it would look okay. Or like you said, baking soda. I see lots of baking soda done with snowboards. Well, the problem with molding sand, Sam, is what they were talking about earlier is the scale. If you're being somewhat anal about it, the grains of the sand look too big um, compared to a 10 millimeter mini. You get up into the bigger stuff, it's not nearly as bad, but at the 15, the 10 millimeter, 6 millimeter game, sand's hard to use just because it looks like fields of tiny boulders. And a lot of people use it. I've seen sand used for a lot of stuff, and it's good for grit and everything like that. But again, if you're at the smaller scales, it can look off. That's the reason I like, painting the grass, because the grass is such a fine uh, mix anyway. When you paint it, um, you get, it gets a good thing like that. And I've thought of baking soda. I've thought of as far as how to finish out the dunes and everything like that. But getting the shape and the look of the dune so it looks like a dune, and getting that coloring just right because it's so light colored as opposed to this darker brown. It's been challenging. I've tried 2 or 3 times. I haven't come up with something I like yet. Yes, play sand is too big. I guess I'm not following you. What's the train games? Been a long day, so if I'm supposed to know that answer, I apologize. But no, if you're looking for true sand that I think's the right scale, I can't remember what the grid of it is. But the TALON games. All right, that makes more sense. I'm like, train? What was I supposed to build a train? Um, we are hoping to have that, at least the initial pieces, by the end of the month. That's one of the reasons I was trying to get rid of all the TT combat stuff, just so that we would have room, because we're pretty much stuck at a fill up to our gills. And it's coming in lots of different ways too. We're going to have of course, we've got all the plastic stuff that we did in the last Kickstarter. So there's a lot of neat pieces there. We'll be doing MDF buildings and pieces. We're going to be doing some resin stuff. And then we're also going to be doing some 3D models that you'll be able to download, print out if you have the ability. Um, as far as the terrain next week, what would people like to? I don't want to jump off into any water elements yet because we've got a couple of things that I want to have ready to show when we do water. Maybe we can try to put together a MDF build. I figure once we get some of the basics out of the way, that I would start building projects people could follow along. I just wanted to kind of get some of the basics done first so that people could kind of see how I go about doing it. Yeah, because a lot of people are intimidated by MDF buildings. They see those kits and they're like, my God, that like the battleship model that my dad got me when I was 10 years old. They had 10,000. And they're really not. Yeah, I was going to build, some, uh, just some buildings out of bits, opposed to being just a kit. I save all kinds of plastic stuff. I buy toys at garage sales, have just boxes to go in and kind of a unique something, but I'll kind of hold that off to the project. Yeah, textured paint again, but you've got to watch out with textured paint because you run into the same problem with sand. If the texture is too much texture, scale doesn't. Yeah, Dave, I want to paint up some of that stuff. Show that's I've tried to with some of the recent scenarios, tried to incorporate some pieces out of that too. To um, a lot of that stuff is set up for like the minefields. If you wanted to have a large minefield area, paint up your 2-inch minefield things, have your piece here, and then set those around there so that that that's a big mine. But Tiger, as far as a good thing too for texture, especially for resin, is just give it a light sand. You get like some 100 grit sandpaper, give it a light sand. You'd be amazed the texture. Well, any more questions? Anything else I can show you tonight? You got my undivided attention. Uh, some things that are coming up tomorrow night on our 8 o'clock show. We'll be talking more CAV rules, CAV stuff, the CAV convention, CAVCon. We will be debuting the 2 new miniatures that we're releasing for CAVCon, a CAV and a vehicle. We are also going to introduce CAV racing for Wednesday night. So stay tuned for that. That will be rather interesting. Could be some prizes involved. You know, I thought about bringing them up here so if I needed to work on them at the end, I could work on them. I actually got them. I got them primered, I got them base coated, and I got them washed. That's where they're at. Tomorrow's going to be my big temp. Had too much to do today, getting CAVCon and stuff, and getting stuff ready for the train show tonight. But I hope everybody at least drops in over for our virtual convention. I think it's going to be a lot of fun with me and James. It'll be lots of talking, lots of goofing off. We're going to have prizes to give away every hour. Yeah. Again, that'll kind of go into a project. Something that's kind of fun to do. Lava is always pretty cool to do. Yes, we'll be painting, talking Cav, talking about anything except politics and religion. Don't have to worry about any of that. The fun part will be me and James trying to move around inside the studio. Don't have a whole lot of room up here because we got a lot of stuff. But we'll get it all moved around and figure out how to make it work. That starts, what, 10 o'clock or noon on Friday, James? Either 10 or... Oh, that would be, especially for James. James really has knocked his out of the park. I do think that I think we had talked about stuff that we're painting over the weekend. We were going to use prizes. James, you want to play you keep what you kill? Would that work for you? Yeah, I think it starts at 10 o'clock Friday, and then we'll kind of each night we'll just kind of go till we can't go no more, and then we'll start again in the morning. I think that James would get the short end of the stick because he spent a lot more time on him than I am going to spend on mine. They'll look good. Mine will be good tabletop, but he's really went that next step. So I'm assuming that James is not down on destruction or keep what you kill. All right, we're kind of winding down here, so gonna ask anything, got to get it in here pretty quick. Go too long with silence, and we'll call it a day. Because it is Taco Tuesday. Maybe we should have Taco Terrain Tuesday. Everybody can tacos while we're working on. Stretch time. See my chest. CAVCon. Oh, well, good for you. Mine are waiting at home for me, I hope. All right. Well, I think that's going to do it. We managed to get through it tonight. So hopefully I will see everybody tomorrow at our regular CAV show, which is at 8 p.m. Central Time. And we go for about an hour there. And like I said, we'll be showing off the soon to be released CavCon minis and Cav Racing. Wait till you see that. Got everybody confused when I said Cav Racing. All right. Well, thanks, guys. Everybody have a good night, and we will see you tomorrow.